we are moving from the realm of policy that we have seen before to the realm of research. And I structured my intervention this morning on, I can say, my research path. And if you allow me, I can add some affection to these presentations, because I've been working with Max and Henk for a long time. And even in our relationship, of course, research and professional relationship, we have seen transformations because we started with transport networks, and then we moved to more traditional telecommunication networks of, let's say, a first generation. And then we got engaged in user-generated contents and citizen science and participation. So they all have, the transformation is in how we communicate, but also in how we engage the world of research and the world of action, which is a big issue, especially for people working in the research field. We tend to elaborate and do a lot of analysis, but then we are always struggling to come out of the black box of the academia and going into the real world. So what I will share with you today comes from my recent research framework that deals with digital platforms. And we have been working recently on Airbnb and short-term rental platforms. And this is a topic, as you know, it's quite a hot topic all over the world, and which is also being disrupted by recent pandemic situation. So it's a challenging arena to research and discover. And we were awarded with a national research project on the short-term city. We also published several research papers on which I have built my presentation this morning. The idea is I will show you part of our research and then move to some more general remarks that I hope may link to the scope of the DigiTranScope ideas. Our interest in digital platforms came, of course, by working in a changing context, especially there is I can say, an infrastructural context, because we started studying platform society by understanding the platform society, again, as a transformation, a shift from first generation telecommunication networks, as we may mention the famous definition by Al Gore, the superhighway idea. And this first generation networks were, how can I say, they were fit for a particular aim, which was the aim of a certain economic paradigm, that is to increase productivity, to increase efficiency in reducing exchanges in what, especially in information. And because we are geographers, and this is my, of course, my main point of view, we saw that the application, the coming into play of the telecommunication networks, all dominant activities started to operate in the space of flows. And this created, I can say, a sort of, we could call it a sort of cyberspace, where even the global elite, whether they were multinationals or other actors, they bypassed isolated and segmented localities by trying to reach sort of a global network, a global links. But this changed when we see the emergence of platforms, because platforms are working in a different way. Of course, if you think about the big five of the platforms, Google, Amazon, Facebook, Apple, and Microsoft, we can think about a series of hubs that are mediating the flows. So there is a different structure and, of course, a different spatial ideas behind them. We place our, of course, I'm sure that most of you are quite familiar with the word of digital platforms, but we find that Van Dyck work on the platform society as quite illuminating and as a sort of a starting framework, because they define digital platform as intermediaries. So they are these are infrastructures that are enabling interactions among different user groups. And as I may concentrate on the citation by Van Dyck, they say platform is fueled by data, automated and organized through algorithms and interfaces, formalized through ownership relationships, driven by business model and governed through users' agreement. So we have a lot of ingredients here that may, of course, enlarge the discussion about digital platforms on some pillars, I can say. Big data, algorithms, interfaces, terms of services, business models, and of course, network effect. We don't have time, of course, to explore all of them, but we can think of how these platforms are engaging with the transformation in our capitalistic society by introducing new business model. And this business model is becoming more hegemonic model. And I cannot develop my reasoning connecting digital platform with COVID situation, but I will show you at the end, at the very end, how, because it's something happening now. So I haven't had time to see exactly what are the changes, but we know that platforms are playing quite a relevant role even nowadays, and we will see how. For the moment, I will explore and I will share with you our work on Airbnb. Why we chose Airbnb? First of all, because in the short-term rental market, Airbnb has been the leader, and as you all know, and we are interested in this because it applies a lean business model. Of course, in the huge world of digital platforms, where you can find platforms of many different kinds, Airbnb, like others, like we could say Uber or other platforms, they apply this lean business model, which is based on minimal assets of ownership. So they don't own anything, but they are, as I was saying before, as a sort of an interface between electronic communication and real material interaction. And this interaction is interesting for us because it transforms. In this case, we are working on urban areas, and so they are transforming cities because they're playing on this combination between networks and places. And I will show you later how we have explored how platforms play this key role as an interface between the space of flows and the space of places. And we have investigated how this working as an interface transform urban space. And this transformation implies many things, especially from an economic point of view, because they have the ability to make some places visible and some places invisible. And also by making some places visible, they are working on or they are benefiting, or they are employing the world of flows where communication goes. Maybe it's a bit obscure, but I will show you here that our challenge was to demonstrate how this transformation is uneven, and how from a spatial point of view it is highly concentrated. So in a way we are questioning the idea of the pervasiveness of such networks. And of course they have also an impact on society, because they are producing value, and this value is not evenly distributed, but highly unevenly distributed. So we are introducing the concept and the idea of inequalities. As I was saying, we focus on among the many pillars of digital platforms, we are focusing on the spatial dimension. And in order to focus on this spatial dimension, we have used Manuel Castell's idea of the space of flows and the space of place. And Manuel Castells was, as you all know, produced the very famous trilogy of The Rise of the Network Society. And of course, when he was talking about the space of flows and the space of place, he was referring to the first generation telecommunication networks. But we think that these two ideas can still be moved into the realm of the platform society. Why? Because the space of flows, as Castells defined, is a material organization of time-sharing social practices that work through flows. And he described this space of flows as a sequence of exchange and interaction between physically disjointed positions held by social actors in economic, political, and symbolic structures. So he was, in a way, this space of flows may refer to cyberspace, although Castells said that cyberspace is something a bit different. But anyway, we might think, we are allowed to think about something less material, but traveling in the cyberspace. On the other hand, we have the space of place, which is, as Castells explained, a sort of locale, where you refer to forms, you refer to functions, you refer to meanings that are self-contained, and they have a territorial contiguity, where people build their life in reference to those places. So places can be, are working at different dimensions, that is home, neighborhood, city, regions. Now, how do we link these two places? These two places are always in the world of, in the realm of platforms. They're always in tension, because if we place this reasoning in the urban context, we can say that cities especially are structured and destructured simultaneously by these two logics. That is the logic of the space of flows that tend to link, let's say globally, different nodes, but these nodes are earth-based, they are grounded to the earth. And these are the space of places that carry their own meanings, their own values, their own understanding. And if I transfer these two ideas in the Airbnb platform, and we imagine that Airbnb works like a network orchestrator, and this network orchestrator works, as you can see, between the users that are the owners and managers of the assets that are traded on the platform. Of course, in the case of Airbnb, we are referring to accommodation, and this relationship between owners of the assets, it's crucial for regulating the market. What's happening in the platform is that, for example, if we take the Airbnb examples, we have guests that are the users of the assets and people that are booking and choosing their accommodation on Airbnb. And on the other hand, we have the hosts that are the owner of the assets. What do? They put up an interaction among them based on information. This information that travels through the platform, which is managed by Airbnb, because Airbnb is managing the flows of data and information, which is produced only by users. And this stock of information, as someone defines it, as a sort of a new enclosure, is strategic because this is the real value that is engineered by the platform. And this information is producing value, as you will see in our analysis. And so we could say that this value is part of what Sundarajan defined as the crowd-based capitalism. What we, to demonstrate this, our case study used big numbers. So our analysis was based on more than 12,000 georeferenced listings, which is the accommodations, and more than 600,000 reviews left by Airbnb users on the platform in more than 10 years. So the first thing we did, we moved on the space of flows. Why? Because these are the accommodations that are advertised on the platform, but that they have their own route on the earth, that is in the Florence area. I don't know if you ever visited Florence, but Florence is, I can say, morphologically is a typical historical European center with a well-defined historical center, which is also recognized by UNESCO as a UNESCO heritage. So it's a very small area, only 5 square kilometers. And in these 5 square kilometers, we find the 62% of the supply, that is all the listings, and more than 70% of the demand. So the platform is transferring this small area globally, but then when you look at it in real, it refers to a very small and concentrated area. So the platform in this way, it is not helping ubiquitous distributions, but it is vehiculating a rather concentrated supply. In this case, it's a supply of goods, which is the listings and the accommodation. But if we look, if we don't look, the first picture is that I showed you is it's like a photograph. It's not dynamic. But what we have done by looking at the dynamic of accommodations going on the platform, what's happening in 10 years? We see a process, as you can see from the 4 pictures. It is a process that it is cumulative. It is always insisting, it is always playing on the very small historical center of the town. Maybe you can say, yes, but from the 4th picture, we can see that the area is enlarging. Yes, it is enlarging, but this enlargement of this spreading, let's say, of the Airbnb effect in town, it's not so strong as it is compared to the city center. In the picture on the right, you can see how this red area, which is the core, the historical center, it is always more and more concentrating. And why do we have this dynamic? We have this dynamic because we move on the space of place. Why it is so concentrated and so uneven? Because it is based on the reviewing mechanism. For doing this, we have analyzed the text of the reviews and the text of the descriptions of the accommodations. And we have extracted, let's say, the functions that Airbnb users privilege in the choice of their accommodation. First of all, they prefer distance, which is distance from transportation facilities, distance from artistic landmarks. Then we have transport. Then we have a station. While services, landmarks, facilities, we could say that the distance from these, let's say, important or relevant functions seems to override any other concerns. For example, the feature of the accommodation, whether, I don't know, it's a newly arranged flat, or whether it is modern or whether it is more traditional. So the accumulation mechanism works on the reviewing mechanism, which is engineered and distributed by the platform. So this is why I was saying before that the value mechanism, the value creation process transfer on the information which is exchanged between the host and the guest. Of course, behind all this, there are Airbnb algorithms, because the reviewing system is more or less overtly directed and controlled by Airbnb, because they, for example, ask both guest and host to behave well. So most of the reviews, and especially if you look at the rankings, they're all positive. Why? Because the more positive comments you have, the more positive reviews you have, the higher is the chance that your accommodation will be chosen by other hosts. So this is quite, if I've heard in other talks talking about surveillance. There is a control behind all this that I don't have the time to explore now, and this is what we will also explore with our national project. We haven't gone so far, but on this, but we know that this is how platform works. So what were the results that we gained from our analysis? First of all, that this interfacing process is reinforcing and it is cumulative. So definitely from a spatial point of view, unequal, uneven, that this transformation, that this interfacing process transform private apartments into sort of nodes that travel in the space of flows. And this, all this mechanism is reproducing patterns of value concentration in the space of place. And this, as you all know, I mean, we read it in newspapers almost every day, that this creates a lot of conflicts in most of the historical and tourist towns all over the world, about the use of houses and accommodations and on the renting markets in many cities, conflicting with residents, indigenous population and tourist population. We identified how the digital reputation, in this case by the means of reviews, they act as a sort of an echo chamber. They are like shouting in the space of flows, and they are forging some specific areas that meet the requirements of the Airbnb community. So we know that the digital reputation in the case of Airbnb is focusing on specific areas, that those that are providing good accessibility to transport facilities, those that are providing good connections with artistic or tourist landmarks. And then
I think we're having some...
is the Airbnb community is concentrating their demand, creates a sort of a narrative about places. So they are creating a sort of virtually forged reality that sometimes it even mimics the place. And we are in fact exploring just now what is the imagery, what is the representation of a certain place, that from place goes global through the space of flows. But then because it is a circle, it comes back into places, because we know that if everybody's looking for central places, well connected, it tends to reproduce this arrangement. If I move out, as I said before, if I move out from my research, what happened after we started working and in a way showing our results? That in my now quite long life of researcher and university representative, I've never had so much, let's say, success outside the university. So my research has gone public. Why? Because we were discussing a hot topic, short-term rentals, and we have published results with analysis that included a lot of data, a lot of analysis that especially local government were not able to do. So many newspapers interviewed us, a lot of TV channels gave our speech, and this is also something that I would like to mention, because when we are able to transfer our skills, because as you have seen, I've shown you maps, I've shown you numbers of data we used, but what are the problems here? First of all, data. We scrape data, we mine data with a lot of effort. We used inside Airbnb. But what happened? One of our papers was rejected by quite an important journal because of ethical reasons. They said, who owned the data? Even if we were not publishing private data, but aggregated data. So what about the data? The data are owned by the platform. Some of them are open, some of them are not. How do we access this data? We need really advanced skill in order to analyze this data. And then when we try to interface this data with other data, for example, census data or other data, this is not very easy. We could do it because we have some experience, but it took us almost a year to, first of all, to collect the data, all the data, put them in a nice and correct data set. So quite standards. Are there standards from the platform to publish data? No, maybe they change it. They change quite often for different reasons. Maybe they have discovered that some information they are giving free, they are strategic, and maybe they have value for them because they can sell the data to somebody else. But then the results, we have seen that the results that we produced are very relevant for planning because they show market behaviors, spatial choices, and so on. I'm not telling anything new, but we know that they are, of course, potentially relevant once you have to plan, but not only to plan, but also to govern some phenomena. So, for example, our Airbnb analysis were addressing the problem of over-tourism, land use, function distribution, and this requires governance that we cannot do, but we can be sort of facilitators between the platform and the local institutions that are not able to deal with this information and with this analysis. And platforms are, for example, during COVID time, I'm sure that some of you might have come across the Facebook data for good. So some platforms adopted this more, let's say, more democratic and more open policy to give some data free to the world of research, and not only. Why? Because we were in a sort of an emergency period. So some action was going to be taken. So some information was needed. We used some data coming from Facebook to see what were the changes, what were the effects of the lockdown, not only in terms of function, but for example, this is a map on Google mobility change with reference to workplaces. So some places are like switching on and other places are switching off. This is a sort of, how can I say, demographic weight, demographic pressure on, because how do Google get the data? They get the data. Well, I can show you another picture if you look.
Thank you, Cristina. Just a question. Are you wrapping up because we need some time?
Yes, yes. This is the last slide. It was just because during the week I heard someone talking about surveillance and other things. And in times of COVID, most governments are struggling with apps trying to manage the possible diffusion of the virus, but we already have stuff here. So we could show the day after the lockdown that, for example, in Italy, most of the ski resorts on the Alps lost, let's say, populations, while the urban area were, of course, increasing their demographic pressure. So I showed you these pictures, only this analysis, only to enlarge a little bit the discussion of the relationship with digital platforms with reference to data and with reference to phenomena that needs to be governed not only by researcher, but of course by interactions with other bodies. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the great presentation that was really connected to many of the discussion we had, and also on our work in data governance, and it was an excellent case. So I would like to open the floor for the Q&A, and there are already some questions. I think it was an excellent example of showing how these platforms really capture social value that is created by the interaction between host and guest, but that presenting as neutral intermediaries, but at the same time, they really have political impact, and it's really difficult for them to give back the social value that they produce through this social interaction. So it was really inspiring example, very, very good. And if there are not, I mean, I'm sure there is some questions.
I have a question, of course, can't avoid that. Thank you very much, Cristina. Always a great pleasure to see you. Always a great pleasure to see your research, and Romano's. Can you maybe say something more about the social effects that Airbnb and the concentration of value in certain rent properties that are normal for rental have with respect to, those that normally, those who are property owners would benefit, but those who are looking for places to rent, to live, obviously find that they have to go elsewhere because those properties are being used or bought to rent for Airbnb, and therefore it drains, the opportunity for people who are seeking to rent, and normally these are the lower income groups. So can you say something about that social impact?
Yes, of course, I didn't have, I didn't explore this relationship too much, but because we are moving into a sort of a more qualitative, and of course more place approach to the phenomena I was exploring. But when I said we are dealing how the flows then connects to the place, and this is what Max was referring to, because it has a social impact, and the social impact comes because it is creating conflicts, and it is creating conflicts of use. I mean, I'm sure that all of you are reading articles in newspapers about people complaining about the abuse, let's say, if you allow me this word, the abuse of short-term rentals, especially in historical centers. And it creates conflicts not only because it is changing or really impacting on the price of renting houses. And this we have analyzed, and we are not sure that it's really impacting so much, but is impacting also on behaviors. For example, in Florence, there is a group which is called Noi quando dormiamo, which means and when can we sleep? Because sometimes flats rented to tourists. It means that tourists are on holiday, so they come late at night, they make noise and whatever. So they are not, or maybe people that live in buildings where 90% of the flats are rented to tourists, and they are the only people living in Florence, so they don't have any relationship. They have a continuous come and go of foreigners. So there is a problem of integration. What I have been discussing, for example, with Florence local government is what are the properties that are actually going on the Airbnb market, because I know that all of you, when you are renting a flat on Airbnb, you are looking for the famous room with a view. You want a nice top floor flat in the town center overlooking the cathedral or whatever. But then can you imagine, let's say, a traditional family with 3 kids and maybe a couple of grannies living on the 4th floor of a very nice historical building where you have no lift, where you have no parking facilities, where you have you don't have supermarkets nearby? So probably we should inquire a little bit more what kind of properties are these platform movimenting, they are vehiculating. But definitely the social impact is strong, because it is creating a separation from residents and their requirements, and of course the tourist market. I don't know what's happening now with COVID, because things are changing. Our analysis are going on now, but even in this respect, even Airbnb data have been modified a little bit. So we have tried to engage Airbnb directly in our national project, because it's better to have them as friends and not as enemies. But Airbnb are quite clever in this, because they're quite clever, as you have seen, even during the time of COVID, to give free access or to rent flats to doctors and nurses moving from one place to another in time of emergency. So we should definitely include also the social dimension in the platform mechanism.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes, Chiara, thank you.
Hi, thanks for the presentation, and hello, Cristina, it's nice to see you virtually. Actually, I'd like to ask you if you can, I suppose you cannot show the slides again, because I had a question about one of the first slides you presented, the slide with a diagram, a circular diagram, including different kinds of platforms, or even if you can show the slides, it's not a problem. My question is, for what I got from the diagram, you clustered the platforms in terms of objective, let's say. Have you tried to cluster also, apart from the research you presented today, but this is a question that is of my interest in general, to cluster the platform in terms of who owns the platforms, who is managing the processes that the platform are intended to fuel. So if the platform is produced by technically, I mean, produced by a public administration, or the platform is produced by a private company, or if there are mixed combinations, or I suppose the slide doesn't have this kind of classification, but I wonder whether you tried this kind of classification.
No, we didn't actually. I showed that classification to show you that, oh, there are so many different platforms, and each platform has its own business model behind.
Yeah.
And this, of course, implies different kind of interactions. We are mainly working. We have had experience with Airbnb, which is as it has been defined by the scientific literature, the lean platform. Of course, because they don't own the assets, but they are just, as I was saying, they are vehiculating other people assets, and this is the thing. And of course, they have something in common. They always work on the famous network effects. So the larger the platform is, the more successful it is. But if you are interested on this, there are several interesting studies that already have worked on this classification of different platforms.
Yeah, that would be useful. Thank you.
Thank you, Chiara.
We have one comment from Elene. Maybe you want to make the point live. So, I mean, it's interesting example of how to deal with this.
Let me read the question, or maybe if you want to ask me directly.
Yes, it wasn't really a question.
You are in the space. Are you in a spacecraft?
Yes.
You are in the space of flows.
To protect you from the surroundings. Yes, I was just thinking I could relate to the comment you had earlier, because in the building where I live, residents have to apply to the housing board, I guess, or housing association board, if they want to rent out their flats on Airbnb. And it's because of the exact reasons you said earlier about they want to keep like a community, so you get to know your neighbors rather than having a lot of strangers, and to avoid noise and other negative effects that may come from a lot of short-term rentals.
I think also the city of Amsterdam, instead at the city level, did regulation on how to limit Airbnb renting, right? So maybe
yes.
What do you think about this?
Yeah, as you have seen, I mean, that's why I was mentioning that in the case of platform, the governance then is acquires many different dimensions, many different reactions that are, of course, locally produced and elaborated. If you see, for example, what happened in Barcelona, or what happened in London or in Berlin, there are differences. Some local administration are actually banning almost Airbnb in certain areas, or they are limited the time that owners can put their houses on Airbnb. The problem is that there is not you can say a general way to govern this phenomena, but it is declinated very differently in all over Europe. Is doing quite well, I can say. They are trying to introduce different measures to let's say to govern the phenomena, but I cannot say that they are all successful, because when the business was high, I don't know, as I told you, I don't know what's happening now after COVID. I don't know, I haven't, we are collecting the data now, so maybe next year, in the next spring, autumn, winter school, we could discuss better about the effects and see whether the government of the phenomena changed.
Yes, thank you. I think we have a few comments in the chat. We can address this and then probably close the session, because the first one from Alberto is from a very economic perspective, I think. So he asked about, since platforms are multi-sided business, did you look at how each side started to grow and which side drove the growth? So an analysis of platforms and multi-site. The second one, or maybe we can, do you want to reply to this one first?
Yes. There is quite a lot of literature, not only in Florence, but also in other countries, especially in the US. There are some US research that they have analyzed a lot the relationship between Airbnb, for example, and hotels and other accommodation facilities. In Florence, I can say they are working in the same space. So another conflict that is definitely emerging is not only with people living in Florence, but is also, for example, with hotel and let's say traditional accommodation facilities people, because they say, of course, they have to follow a lot of regulations, for example, security, and now even the problem of sanitation and so on. So they are obliged to follow certain rule, and certain rule then implies costs. While in Airbnb, this is not so regulated. It works on Airbnb, it works on, as I was saying, on the reviewing mechanism, which is also ensuring trust between the host and the guest. Because if you say that your flat is secure because there is blah blah, or because your flat is has been sanitized because blah blah, then if you rent the flat and you see that what you declared is not true, then you put a negative review, and the one negative review is much worse on the platform than good ones. So the reviewing system is building trust, and this of course doesn't work the same with traditional hotels and accommodation.
Yes, I would go to Richard the comments and then close with the anchor remarks. So Richard, would you want to pose the question probably? Yes.
Sure, I can do it, I think maybe quite quickly. To what extent has there been research, and maybe this is broader than just directed at Cristina, although I found your presentation outstanding. To what degree has there been research into the way in which we can use platforms for government service delivery? Because one of the things that I'm trying to do with my company is work on bringing that platform approach to governments, focusing on the really good things that they enable, which is high degrees of personalization and customization and reach and penetration, intimacy of engagement, while trying to avoid some of the really big problems that come with platforms, including risks to privacy and anonymization, a drive towards commoditization and lowest price. And I guess the question then is there already research into this, and are there examples of where this is being done successfully?
I can, I'm sure other people here are much more expert on this than myself, but I can say that from the field of geography, because I'm a geographer, there are examples of platforms where people are participating to give their own understanding and their own appreciation with lived space. I mean, I could give you a very famous example, maybe it's a bit out of what you're saying, but it is in this framework. If you think about OpenStreetMap, which is, as you know, building the map of the world, you are not so much interested in the map you are creating, but in the community you are building. Because once you engage a community to create a map of your area, people choose the items that they want to be represented on the map. So if you can work in an analogous way, for example, the University of Turin, they have a platform where they have asked teenagers to add places which they use during their free time, and of course there are all the problems of engaging people to contribute in the platform. This is a big, of course, it's a big issue. But then, because people choose what they want, then on this participatory approach, I can say, of course, is an approach that can help a lot governing territorial problems or other problems. But I'm sure that other people can contribute more than this.
Thank you, Cristina. Unfortunately, we should almost close the session. So I will leave this for Hank's comment that there was a comment in the chat, but you can do it live.
Marina, thank you very much. The reason that I was posing a question to you, Cristina, was I wanted to have the floor. Because one of the reasons that Max and I took the lead in organizing this event was because of the history, of course, of Vespucci. It was quite spectacular when you brought us to Florence, when you showed us the hills with all the fruit and all the oil. And it always will stay, at least in my memory, but when I talk to Max, he always also comes with all our historical moments. And of course, I can ask you all kinds of questions of what do you think the results are of this initiative. But what I especially want to do is to thank you for spending so much time and energy in bringing together young people and also some older people. And I hope we will meet each other soon, somewhere live. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was very nice to be with you again.
Yes, if I may, I have to say I'm really sorry we cannot be here all together as we planned with Max in the farm where we usually, where we have met for the last almost 10 years, probably 9-10 years, and I think we are a good example of the transformation that builds on the past, but is open to the future, even if our hair is getting whiter, as well, my hair, your beards, and so on. And but I think we should write a paper on this, or now it's a bit old-fashioned. Maybe creating a video or something a bit more sexy that we could definitely tell something even for the DigiTranScope.
Well, Cristina, knowing how busy Hank is, probably if we manage to write a tweet, that's about it.
No, we don't want any more tweets. Tweet now is all.
No, it's out.
Out.
TikTok, Max. A 10-second TikTok.
Good idea.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Cristina.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Cristina and everybody. I'm not sure now what's going to happen next, so because we are going to move to finally listen more the perspective about our participants and what they did during this week, but after the coffee break, for sure.
Yes, for sure.
But I just want to be sure that we will be all there after the coffee break. Otherwise, we need to say goodbye. It's very complicated online, but I wanted to be sure that maybe Cristina will not continue. So goodbye to Cristina. Thank you again. And Richard, Stephen, are you joining afterwards, or?
Yes, I hope they are, because we all want to see what has been the
Yes.
real, you know, this has been treading water almost, you know, sort of, yes, we have produced a few things and nice talks, but what we really want to see is what the outcome has been from the work of our colleagues, and so we're really excited about that. I'm going to have a big cup of tea now for this.
Exactly. 15 minutes, I think, so we can